Hey everybody, so I'm back in my reading journal and doing some collage, and I wanted to do the page for this book, Wally Lamb's River is Waiting. It's a newly released book, and let me just say, I'm going to review this book, and there's going to be spoilers, because I don't know how to review a book without giving spoilers. And this book lends itself very easily to spoilers. So, if you haven't read this book and you don't want spoilers, then maybe just exit scene and come back whenever you've read it. Because I want to talk about this book as I'm doing this piece. So, there's your warning, spoiler warning. Anyways, let me just say this was a very heavy book. It was a good book. I don't rate my books, so I don't have a star rating for you guys to let you know what I rated or anything like that. But this book was heavy. First off, I found the perfect picture to kind of go along with the cover, so that's cool. Anyways, so this book features it's the story of a guy named Corbin, or Corby as he's known, and he ends up in prison. And this tells the story of his experience. And I will say this. The very first chapter made my jaw drop. Because in the very first chapter is when you realize what Corby did to warrant him going to prison. So, Corby is married, has 2 kids, twins, Nico and I want to say Maisie, but I feel like that's not correct. I'm the world's worst at remembering characters and even really remembering what a book is about. So it's interesting for me that I'm able to kind of come on here and talk about this book. Anyways, Corby and his wife have twins. Nico is the little boy, and then there's a little girl. I think her name's Maisie. They're twins, and Corby ends up unaliving the little boy, purely accidental. There are, I would say, there's trigger warnings with this book, for that, but also for alcoholism and yeah. So Corby unalives his son Nico. I just found this image online. I don't know if it's anything. And he ends up going to prison, and he's grappling with his relationship with his wife and whether or not she can forgive him and whether or not she's going to stay married to him. And yeah. He ends up, so my take on this book was, it was really good. My jaw dropped the first chapter because of how they tell you what Corby did. Is just kind of like, what? Oh my gosh. But then we go through the whole, so Wally Lamb does a really good job of building these characters and telling their stories, building the character of Corby and building the character of his wife. And so Corby ends up going to prison, and this is his story about what all he's gone through in prison, which is not pretty. And then he ends up, why is this crooked? And why is this not staying? What the heck? Let me just see how many times I can say He ends up going to prison. He ends up, his roommate, or his cellmate, Manny, he ends up having a good connection with, or relationship with. I'm going to use big glue on this. He ends up forming a relationship with his, not any kind of a sexual relationship, just a really good close friendship with his bunkmate, Manny, who is LGBT. So he's got a connection with his roommate. They're looking out for each other. All that good stuff. He gets a early release from prison. I think he was sentenced to like 3 years or something like that. He gets early release. And this whole time he's battling alcoholism and benzo addiction. And he's working on getting clean, and he promises his wife that he'll get clean and all that good stuff. And he ends up not being able to leave prison early. And then this is where the story is like, really? This is where we're going? He ends up having to stay in prison and finish out his time. And while he's in prison finishing out his time, he ends up getting COVID, and he ends up passing away from COVID. And I just think it could have been more dramatic than COVID. I don't know why I have weird feelings about that, but it's like, really? That's where we're going with? Really? So I was not really impressed with that. It was kind of like, oh, well, I could have thought of another way. Anyways, he ends up passing away before he comes home, and he ends up, his wife, has to deal with his death before he came home. And has to deal with his death before he comes home. And so the story is about her forgiveness and her dealing with the loss of her daughter, and then now the loss of her husband. After his death, she meets up with Manny. He's been released from prison, and he tells her kind of what all happened to him in prison and what all he went through, and that he was really trying to get clean, and he was really trying to do right. And yeah. And so let me just connect a few things. So here's the cover of the book. Here is prison. It's printed off online. The prison is located, there's a river that runs behind the prison. And while Corby is on work duty, he goes out to the river and he finds a rock, a really cool rock that he hangs onto, and ends up, it's a good luck rock kind of thing. And so he hangs onto it while he's doing his time, and then his plan is to keep it when he gets out, but he ends up obviously not getting out and not keeping the stone. But Manny, his bunkmate, has the stone and gives it to the wife after, after Corby's passed and after she meets up with Manny afterwards. And so he gives her the lucky stone that Corby had while in prison. And they meet at the river to spread Corby's ashes. And then, so her and the daughter, who's a little bit older now, because he spent, 3 years, almost 3 years in prison. And I think she was 2 when the little boy died. They throw the stone in the river. Anyways, while Corby's in prison, he's an artist, and he makes friends with the librarian there, and so she has him do this big mural on the of the river before the prison was there, so of the land before the prison was built, and on the wall in the library. And there's this big to-do about this mural, and the news people are there, and they're trying to get good publicity for the prison. And Corby paints a little butterfly up in the corner, and that is Nico, the little boy who passed away. But the mural is of the river, and the different people in his life, are depicted throughout the mural. So, anyways, at the end of the story, the wife meets up with the librarian, and she takes her to the prison so she can see the mural that he painted and all this and that. And so the wife's standing in front of the mural and talking to Corby, who's passed, and talking, she forgives him and all this and that. And then the librarian comes up with the little girl, and the little girl sees the little butterfly in the corner and says, "Hey, boy." And so it's just kind of connecting the little girl to her deceased brother. Anyways, again, really good book. I really enjoyed it. I was kind of put off with the whole COVID thing. I don't know why. I just was kind of like, really? But, the timeline leads up into the 2020s when COVID hit and all that good stuff. So I get it from the timeline that's how it worked. But, I that's my opinion. So it was a good book. It was a heavy book. It was heavy to read about his experiences in prison and what he went through and some of the things that happened to him. And this whole time he's trying to keep the relationship with his wife, and, doing therapy and doing AA and all this and that. And again, it was pretty heavy, but it was a good read. And I think from what I know about Wally Lamb, I think he tends to do some heavy stuff, but he did really well with this as far as creating the characters, and you could really connect to them or relate to them and all that good stuff. So The River is Waiting by Wally Lamb. I finished it on August 21st, and there you have it. So that didn't take long at all. Here's the last book I read, Tom Felton's Beyond the Wand. But I wanted this video to kind of focus on this, and I don't know why. I just wanted this video to focus on this, again, with spoilers about the book. It was a good book, and I recommend it if you can handle the heaviness of it, the seriousness of it. So anyways, thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye for now.